Here at Nomad Capitalist, we genuinely believe that investing in foreign markets, especially emerging and frontier markets, gives you a higher probability of success with higher returns, greater appreciation, lower tax rates, and just general diversification outside of your country. Now, of course, for a lot of people, that idea is scary because so many people believe that their country is the best on earth. It's the only safe place to invest. But imagine my surprise when one investing legend came out and said that investing overseas entirely was bad. I'm going to comment on why he's wrong in this video. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson. If you want to learn more about Nomad Capitalist and how we help high-level entrepreneurs go offshore and go where they're treated best, you can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Now, the legendary investor that I referenced is none other than the late Jack Bogle. Now, Jack Bogle was the founder of the Vanguard Group, which basically pioneered the idea of the index fund, very low-fee funds. And his idea was that you could obtain better results by investing in basically stock indexes, the S&P 500, for example, rather than going out and paying people a much higher management fee to pick individual stocks and things like mutual funds. And they did very well. Now, I'm not here to criticize Jack Bogle. It's not what I want to do. He obviously was very successful and started a new trend in the investing world. Now you see all these different firms charging no commissions, very low spreads. Definitely did a lot of good things. But I saw a video from when he was alive called Why Jack Bogle Doesn't Like Investing in Markets Overseas. And I want to talk about what exactly it is he said. Basically, the summation is Jack Bogle, who lived in and invested in the United States, said two things. Number one, if you're invested in U.S. stocks, you have international exposure because U.S. companies sell all over the world. Now, certainly you're getting exposure from those sales. I don't know that would really correlates to a direct exposure to the countries. So I don't really believe that argument holds weight. But the bigger issue was number two, in which he said, hey, the U.S. is going to be the best performing market in the world going forward. Now, this may be a generational issue where obviously, in Jack Bogle's lifetime, the United States was the preeminent place to be. And, what I've talked about here is, when I was born in 1984, the United States was the best place to be born. I believe number two was West Germany, if that kind of gives you an indication. But I look at my window here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It didn't look like this in 1984, but it does look like this now. I see 50-story buildings everywhere. I see things, construction everywhere. And so I say to myself, what once was won't necessarily always be. And so the United States was the best place to invest for many years. It still, the stock market has obviously had some very good years recently. And I'm not saying it's going to totally fall apart, but the idea that the United States is the only market to invest in going forward, to me, is simply not true. I don't see a compelling case for that. And so what he does, he says, I don't want to invest internationally. So he goes through and he lists three markets as the basis for not wanting to invest overseas. The first market is the UK. So his example for not wanting to invest in the UK is they've got a weird political system, which I don't entirely understand what that means. The UK has done relatively well, and so I don't really understand that. Market number two was Japan. Now Japan, he talks about, it's a low-growth economy, and he's right. They're relatively anti-immigration. They're not replacing themselves. It's an aging society. So on that, we agree. Market number three was France. So, okay, a little American-style French bashing. We get it. I'm not for 35-hour work weeks either. But, okay, plenty of good companies are actually in France. And so those three markets, to me, don't represent the entirety of what we're trying to accomplish here. And what he says is, don't think you're not investing in those markets if you're invested in international index funds or international ETFs or international stocks, because he says they're going to be in there. They're going to be in your fund because those are the countries that are picked. Now, no doubt, I have a European income fund in my portfolio. It's actually done pretty well. It has a nice yield on it. And Number one, let's talk about if you're not living in the United States. Number one is the European Union isn't chasing me down for a 30% dividend tax on all of my dividend income. United States does. Now, I know people who are asset managers who make the case that even after the 30% tax, which can be reduced based on where you live, potentially, if you're paying taxes in that country, but you're going to pay about 30% on U.S. stocks, that even with that, you'll get better performance from U.S. stocks than you would from other stocks. I have not necessarily seen that trend in my own portfolio. I have a European fund that does relatively well. It has some French stocks in there that are some of the better ones. It has some British stocks in there that I guess are some of the better ones. So that particular fund has done relatively well. So anecdotal, perhaps. I do have other funds. I have focused funds from a number of emerging markets. I have an India fund that's done relatively well. I have a Thai fund that's done miserably. Have plenty of Asia funds. And the example that any Asian fund is going to have Japan in it, there's a whole category of funds that are Asia Pacific ex-Japan. Now, some of those funds have too much exposure to Australia for my taste. I want more of the emerging markets that are growing, but you could make the same argument. Australia and Asia have a certain symbiotic relationship. So on the equity side, plenty of opportunities to have exposure to funds that exclude that. You can be in pure play Asia funds. I have a pure play Latin America fund. If you want to be in Europe, be in Europe. And yes, there's not a lot of funds that have exposure to the Slovenian equities. You're going to be in those more developed countries. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily an example to avoid it because there's plenty of other options. I have exposure to REITs in Asia, real estate investment trusts. You can do that. There's plenty of different instruments, I think, that you can use. Now, here's where I also don't agree. And I think this is where the focus, the difference between someone who's a Jack Bogle and a Nomad Capitalist comes into play. You can go out and make direct investments into companies, into real estate, into any number of different mechanisms to invest into a country. I have exposure in real estate in Cambodia, for example, through a boutique fund. I have exposure to real estate in other countries by simply buying real estate. You can have exposure to companies in different countries by buying part of those companies. There are now platforms online. You can buy into startups. There are even golden visa programs in Europe for people who invest in startups. Other countries have infrastructure where you can obtain residence or even citizenship by investing in their companies. So if you want exposure to just Turkey, you can go to Turkey. If you want exposure to a certain stock market that's hard to replicate through the international funds and exchanges and all that, you can go and establish a brokerage account in that local country or in that region. Okay, so obviously many countries don't have big stock exchanges. I was in Armenia recently, and I was asking my lawyer, how many companies are in the Armenian stock exchange? He's like, I don't know, 12 or something. So not a lot of robustness in that, but certainly if you come to Asia, you can get an Asia Pacific focused brokerage account, and you can trade Thai stocks. You can trade Singaporean stocks. You can do that. Sometimes you can do it through a bank account in that country. Get a Singapore bank account, you get exposure to Singaporean stocks and also Singaporean government securities if that's what you're looking for. So to me, there's so many different ways to play in international markets. To say that everyone's just going to buy an index fund and you're going to be exposed to France and Japan and it's all going to go to the tubes is a little bit disingenuous. And with all due respect to a guy who accomplished a lot, I think we're in a bold new world right now where there are so many new opportunities that didn't exist before. We are all so much more mobile. We help people all the time who want to go to some of these markets and find deals. Whether that's for with the benefit of getting a residence or a citizenship as kind of their insurance policy on the back end, or whether it's just because they want to meet deals. We have a whole infrastructure of people who do this here. And so my suggestion is have some equities, have some debt in your portfolio if you want. But, I see people getting much higher returns in what I think are much less risky vehicles, owning government debt in pretty well-run countries, or owning real estate in the middle of a city that's growing in a country that's heading in the right direction. To me, that's a lot more solid than simply putting your money in necessarily some mutual fund and hoping for the best. You get more control, you get potentially higher returns, possibly much better tax benefits, especially if you're not a U.S. citizen. For me, the world has changed. The idea that we're simply not going to invest internationally because there's nowhere else to get a return is not true. Probably not then, certainly not now. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.